Can you imagine the sheer brilliance of the Galactic Training Academy's halls, gleaming like polished mirrors under the artificial sunlight, reflecting a kaleidoscope of alien species bustling toward their classrooms? Picture the towering Zither, their crystalline exoskeletons shimmering like chandeliers, slithering Vasi with their deadly grace, and the hulking Kogath, their bone-crushing limbs practically screaming power. And then, in the midst of this cosmic parade, there's a lone human, barely 5 feet 3 inches, looking like a delicate flower caught in a storm of steel. Lieutenant Joe, the new combat instructor, seemed so out of place, her athletic but petite frame drawing skeptical side eyes from faculty who'd been buzzing about the audacious decision to let a human teach advanced combat. A human, of all species. How could someone so small stand a chance in this galaxy of giants? As the first batch of students poured into the combat training chamber, a deep, booming voice cut through the air like a thunderclap. "They sent us this," it roared. The speaker, a Kogath named Thex, didn't even try to hide his amusement, his metallic scales rippling as he swaggered to the front row. Oh, the nerve. Jo stood at the room's center, hands clasped calmly behind her back, her gaze steady as she watched her students arrange themselves in a traditional semicircle. Each species clung to their own kind, Zither with Zither, Vasi with Vasi, a habit that hadn't budged even after 50 years of humans scraping their way into the Galactic Federation. Can you believe it? 50 years, and still, humans were the odd ones out. That integration? Oh, it was a scandal for the ages. Humans, a species that hadn't even cracked faster than light travel, had the gall to knock on the Federation Council's door and demand a seat at the table. Who did they think they were? The only reason anyone even listened was their jaw-dropping heroics during the hive-mind incursion of 2157. Picture this, a ragtag human cargo ship crew, armed with nothing but mining gear and some cobbled-together improvised explosives, somehow stopped a Class 4 invasion dead in its tracks. Talk about making an entrance. A Vasi student, her forked tongue flicking like a whip, broke the tension. "I smell fear," she hissed, her words sparking a wave of chittering laughs from her classmates. "Fear? Really?" Joe's heart rate didn't so much as twitch. "Instructor," a crystalline voice chimed, sharp and clear as a bell. A Shinar raised a shimmering forearm, light dancing through their transparent digits. "There must be some mistake. We were promised advanced combat training. Our species have honed natural weapons over millions of years. What could a human possibly teach us?" The room fell silent, the question hanging like a storm cloud. Joe's brown eyes swept the room, catching every smirk, every dismissive shrug, every cocky stance. And then, "Oh, you should have seen it," she smiled. Not a nervous, shaky grin, but a smile so sharp it made half the class flinch. "My name is Lieutenant Joe," she declared, her voice ringing with an authority that belied her small stature. "And you're right, there has been a mistake." She paused, letting the words sink in like a stone in still water. "Your mistake was thinking natural weapons make you a natural warrior. Oh, how wrong you are." She stepped forward, her movements precise, almost predatory. "Today, we start with a basic assessment of your skills. But first, I want each of you to show me your most effective combat technique. Impress me." Thex, the Kogath, didn't hesitate. His metallic scales glinted as he strode forward, all swagger and confidence. "Allow me to show you why this is a waste of time," he bellowed. Without warning, he slammed his reinforced fist into a training dummy, the impact shattering it into 1,000 pieces that skittered across the floor like frightened insects. "We Kogath can generate forces over 30,000 newtons," he roared. "Our scales laugh at plasma fire. What could we possibly learn from a species that needs artificial armor just to survive space?" The room buzzed with approval, students nodding smugly. "Yeah, what could she teach them?" "Impressive," Jo said, her voice cool as ice, betraying nothing. "Anyone else? Come on, don't be shy." Up slithered Nyx, a Vasi female, her serpentine body uncoiling to a towering height that nearly brushed the ceiling. Her species' neural venom could drop a target in seconds, and their hypnotic movements? Pure predator perfection. "Our techniques have been perfected over millennia," she purred, launching into a series of lightning-fast strikes that left afterimages dancing in the air. "We are living weapons," she proclaimed, her voice dripping with pride. The class erupted in murmurs of awe. Could you blame them? Then came the Shinar delegation, moving as one, their crystalline bodies weaving a dazzling light show that left everyone blinking. They could absorb and redirect energy, making them nearly untouchable. Their leader, Prism, caught a practice blast from a training weapon, sent it ricocheting around the room like a pinball, then absorbed it back into his body with a flourish. "Our defenses are unmatched," he declared, his voice humming like wine through a crystal cave. "We cannot be surprised, overwhelmed, or defeated by your primitive physical attacks." The room practically vibrated with their confidence. Who could top that? The demonstrations kept coming, each one more mind-blowing than the last. The Mgar manipulated gravity fields like it was child's play. The Helix restructured their DNA mid-battle, adapting to threats in real time. The Quantum Striders phased in and out of space-time, dodging attacks like ghosts. With every display, the smirks grew wider, the glances more dismissive. Some students even started whispering bets. How long before this human begged for a transfer? A week? A day? Oh, the arrogance. Jo watched it all, her face a mask of calm, not a flicker of emotion betraying her thoughts. When the final student finished, she strolled to the center of the training area, her footsteps echoing in the sudden, heavy silence. "Thank you for those demonstrations," she said, rolling her shoulders in a casual stretch that somehow felt like a challenge. "You've shown me exactly what I expected, a room full of gifted individuals who've never tasted real combat. And that, my friends, is your first mistake." The air seemed to freeze. Thex's scales bristled, his eyes narrowing. "You dare?" he growled, his voice a low rumble that made the floor tremble. "Oh, I dare." Jo shot back, her voice slicing through his like a laser. "You've shown me tricks. Fancy, impressive tricks, I'll give you that. But tricks aren't combat. Not one of you has shown tactical thinking. Not one of you has shown real awareness. And most importantly," she flashed that unnerving smile again, "not one of you has stopped to wonder why humans, with all our so-called weaknesses, were chosen to teach this class. Why us? Why me?" She bent down and picked up a simple training staff. Nothing fancy, no energy fields, no high-tech enhancements, just a plain metal rod. Holding it lightly, she tilted her head, her eyes glinting with challenge. "So, who's brave enough to help me show you why? Any takers?" The question hung in the air, daring someone to step up. Who would it be? Thex let out a booming laugh, the sound echoing off the walls. "Very well, human," he sneered, striding forward. "Let's get this over with. Time to show you what real power looks like." Jo nodded, her smile never wavering, and gestured to the combat ring. "Standard Federation rules. First to yield or be rendered combat ineffective loses. Want the first move? Go ahead, big guy." The Kogath's laughter shook the chamber as he stepped into the ring, his massive frame towering over Jo like a mountain over a pebble. "You're giving me the first move?" Against enhanced Kogath reflexes, he dropped into a fighting stance, his scales glinting menacingly. "This is gonna be your funeral, human." The attack came like a freight train, a punch that could have shattered a starship's hull. Students gasped, bracing for the worst, expecting Jo to be pulverized. But can you believe it? She wasn't there. She'd shifted just 3 inches to the left, the punch whistling past so close it ruffled her uniform. Before Thex could blink, her staff tapped the back of his knee. Not a strike, just a gentle tap. "That's one," she said, her voice soft but laced with steel. Thex roared, spinning with terrifying speed, his razor-sharp tail whipping through the air at chest height. It could have sliced an unarmored foe in half. Jo dropped into a perfect split, the tail sailing harmlessly overhead. Her staff flicked out, tapping his ankle. "Two," she called, calm as ever. The room was electric now, students leaning forward, eyes wide. What was happening? The Kogath's attacks became a blur. Punches, kicks, tail swipes, grappling moves, all textbook perfect, each one carrying enough force to level a building. The air thrummed with the sound of his power, students gasping with every near miss. But Jo? She flowed like water, every move seamless, almost lazy, as if she had all the time in the galaxy. She didn't block, didn't counter, she just wasn't where the attacks landed. And after each dodge, her staff tapped another spot on Thex's body. 3. A touch on his hip. 4. A tap on his shoulder blade. 5. A prod at his lower back. The class watched, stunned, as their strongest warrior was taken apart by a human who hadn't thrown a single punch. Some started to notice a pattern in the taps. Were they deliberate? What was she doing? Thex's frustration boiled over, his attacks growing wilder, more desperate. Sweat beaded on his scales. Sweat? On a Kogath? Was that even possible? Getting tired? Jo asked, her breathing steady as a metronome. You've burned enough energy to power a shuttle, and I've barely moved. Want to know why you can't touch me? Her voice was teasing now, almost playful. Stop talking. Thex bellowed, each word punctuated by a strike that could have flattened a tank. Jo ducked, sidestepped, flowed around them like they were nothing. You're stronger than me, she said, tapping his elbow. 6. A tap on his wrist. 7. Faster too. A tap on his spine. 8. Your reflexes are enhanced. A tap on his neck. 9. And then, one final tap. 10. Suddenly, Thex's legs gave out. He stumbled, arms flailing, and crashed to the floor, his mighty frame twitching uselessly. What did you do to me? He slurred, voice thick with shock. The room was silent, every eye locked on the scene. Jo knelt beside him, calm as ever. Each tap hit a nerve cluster in Kogath physiology, she explained, her voice gentle but firm. Hit them in the right order, and your neuromuscular system shuts down for about 10 minutes. No lasting damage, don't worry. She stood, turning to the stunned class. I spent 3 months studying Kogath anatomy for this job. I studied Vasi pressure points, Shinar resonance frequencies, Gar gravitational quirks, every species' weaknesses. I pored over combat footage, medical records, battle histories. Humans? We don't have natural weapons. We can't match your strength, your toxins, your energy tricks. But this, she tapped her temple, eyes blazing. This is our weapon. We study, we plan, we adapt. And we never assume being deadly makes you a warrior. The class was speechless as Thex was helped to a recovery pod, his pride bruised, but his body already mending. Jo waited until he was settled before continuing, her voice softening. On Earth, we built thousands of combat styles, not because we were strong, but because we weren't. We had to outsmart creatures faster, tougher, better armed. Japanese warriors turned an enemy's strength against them. Chinese masters targeted vital points. Russians turned everyday objects into weapons. Every culture faced unique threats and found unique solutions. That's our legacy. Nyx, her tongue flicking thoughtfully, raised her head. But those techniques, they only worked on humans, right? Jo's smile was warm now, almost proud. Oh, Nyx, you'd think so? But we honed them against everything. Massive predators, armored war machines, you name it. When we faced a threat, we didn't try to outmuscle it. We studied it, found its cracks, and built countermeasures. She activated a holographic display, ancient human combat manuals flickering to life. See this? This redirects force. This targets joints. These principles work on any opponent, no matter their advantages. It's not about being the strongest. It's about making their strength your weapon. Prism's crystalline form shimmered with curiosity. Is that why the Federation picked humans as instructors? Because you've spent your history beating stronger foes. Partly, Jo laughed. The sound light, but meaningful. But it's bigger than that. Humans don't just adapt techniques, we adapt ourselves. Every challenge we face, we evolve. We've had to, because we were never the top dogs. You all, she gestured to the students. Your species evolved as apex predators, with natural weapons that ruled your worlds. Humans? We were prey who clawed our way to the top through grit and ingenuity. We don't have one perfect trick. We have thousands of messy, brilliant solutions, and we keep refining them. The Helix representative leaned forward, their form rippling. That's why you watched us so closely during the assessments, isn't it? You were already planning. Exactly. Jo's eyes sparkled. I wasn't just grading you. I was figuring out how to make your natural gifts even deadlier with human techniques. Imagine Vasi flexibility with joint locks. Kogath strength with precision strikes. Your natural weapons, paired with tactical smarts. How unstoppable would you be? The room's atmosphere shifted, the mockery replaced by buzzing excitement. Students started whispering, brainstorming how their abilities could merge with human combat styles. The next few weeks turned the training chamber into a crucible of innovation. Thex, fully recovered and humbled, became a star pupil, his brute force now honed with surgical precision. It's like trading a sledgehammer for a laser, he marveled, practicing controlled strikes. Nyx blended her hypnotic movements with human misdirection, becoming a phantom in combat. The Shinar, led by Prism, wove human defensive tactics into their energy redirection, turning even tiny attacks into devastating counters. Zhou moved among them, tweaking stances, suggesting strategies, her small frame now a beacon of wisdom. Combat isn't about being the perfect weapon, she told them during a grueling session. It's about being the right weapon at the right moment. Humans learned that the hard way. You're learning it by choice, and that makes you unstoppable. On graduation day, the chamber was packed with Federation officials, their eyes wide as Thex and Nyx performed a routine that defied physics, power and grace in perfect harmony. The Shinar's new defensive style dazzled, redirecting energy with a flair that left veteran instructors scrambling for notes. Zhou watched with quiet pride, then stepped forward. These students came here seeing a small human trying to teach warriors. Now, they know the truth. Strength isn't in your gifts. It's in adapting, learning, growing beyond your limits. The galaxy's vast, and there'll always be someone stronger. But victory? That's for those who never stop evolving, never stop learning, and never underestimate a human with a simple staff. The challenge hung in the air like a charged bolt of lightning, crackling with tension. Thex, the towering Kogath, let out a booming laugh that shook the walls of the Galactic Training Academy's combat chamber. "Very well, human," he bellowed, his metallic scales glinting with smug confidence. "Let's begin your assessment. You're about to see what a real warrior can do." Can you imagine the audacity? He thought he'd crush her in seconds. Lieutenant Zhou, barely 5 feet 3 inches and looking like she'd wandered into a den of cosmic predators, just nodded, cool as a comet's core. She strolled to the center of the training area, her every step deliberate, her eyes sharp. "All right, folks, we'll start with basic physical benchmarks," she announced, her voice carrying a quiet authority that made the room hush. "Each of you will tackle the standard Federation combat readiness evaluation. I want to see your speed, your strength, your reaction times. Show me what you've got." Naturally, Thex swaggered forward first, his massive frame practically vibrating with power. The Kogath warrior tore through the course like a supernova, his metallic muscles propelling him at speeds that made the air snap and crackle. The reinforced training equipment groaned under his relentless assault, bending and creaking as if begging for mercy. When he finished, the display flashed scores that would have landed him a spot in special operations on any military world. He stood there, chest heaving, scales gleaming, expecting applause. "Can you believe the ego?" "Adequate," Zhou said, scribbling a note on her data pad, her tone so neutral it was almost infuriating. "Next," the word sliced through Thex's triumphant grin like a plasma blade. "Adequate," he sputtered, his voice a mix of shock and outrage. "I just shattered 3 academy records. Are you blind?" His scales bristled, the room buzzing with his indignation. Zhou didn't even glance up. "You telegraphed every single move, burned energy on flashy nonsense, and left yourself wide open at least 7 times, she said, her voice calm but cutting. "We'll fix that later. Next." Oh, the nerve of her. The class shifted uncomfortably, their smirks fading. Who was this human to talk like that? Nyx, the Vasi, slithered forward next, her serpentine body moving with hypnotic grace that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Her fluid strikes were a blur, each motion so seamless it was like watching liquid art in motion. The Helix followed, their body literally evolving mid-course, reshaping itself to conquer every obstacle with eerie precision. Then came the Quantum Striders, phasing through solid barriers as if they were mere illusions. The room was alive with gasps and murmurs. How could anyone top these displays? Zhou watched it all with an unnerving intensity, her brown eyes tracking every twitch, every choice. She scribbled notes nonstop, her face a blank slate. The only hint she was even paying attention? A slight tilt of her head here, a narrowing of her eyes there. What was she thinking? The tension in the room thickened with every passing minute, heavy as a neutron star. The students had braced for dismissal, maybe some human-style ridicule, or at least a show of intimidation. Instead, They got this silent, methodical observation that felt more menacing than any roar or flex. It was like Joe was dissecting them with her gaze alone. "Your form is sloppy," she told Ngar, who just strutted through his gravity manipulation demo, proud as a peacock. "You lean too hard on your natural tricks and ignore basic positioning. That's a death sentence in a real fight." "But I set a record time," Ngar protested, his voice rising in disbelief. "Did you even see how fast I was?" "Oh, I saw," Joe replied unfazed. "And in a real battle, you'd be dead in seconds because you didn't secure your perimeter." Next, Ngar's jaw dropped, and the room stirred. Was she serious? Then came the Shinar delegation, their crystalline bodies moving in perfect sync, a dazzling display of unity that had everyone mesmerized. They absorbed and redirected energy blasts with such finesse, it was like watching a cosmic ballet. Even Joe paused her note-taking, her eyes locked on their coordinated show. "Better," she said when they finished, her voice softer but still firm. "But you're still acting like individuals faking teamwork, not a true combat unit. Your coordination's pretty to look at, but it's tactically weak. We'll work on that." The Shinars blinked, their crystalline forms flickering in surprise. Pretty but weak? How dare she? By the end of the assessments, the room's vibe had shifted from cocky mockery to a bewildered frustration that hung like fog. Every student had performed at or above Federation combat standards. Every single one had shown off abilities that would have made them legends on their homeworlds. And yet, every single one had been dismantled by this calm, quiet human who hadn't even thrown a punch. How was this possible? Their pride was bruised, their confidence rattled. "Who was this Lieutenant Joe?" "Right," Joe said, setting down her data pad with a deliberate clack. "Now that I've seen what I'm working with, we can start actual combat training. Unless," she glanced around, that unsettling smile tugging at her lips, her eyes glinting with challenge. "Anyone still thinks they've got nothing to learn from a human? Speak up." The room was dead silent, the students exchanging uneasy glances. Did they dare? Thex stepped forward, his metallic scales rippling with barely contained fury. "Enough of this nonsense," he growled, his voice a low rumble that made the floor vibrate. "You've torn apart everyone's performance while doing nothing yourself. Face me in real combat, human, and I'll show you the gap between your fancy theories and true power." Oh, the fire in his eyes. He was ready to crush her. "Ah," Joe said, picking up her simple training staff. Nothing but a plain metal rod, no bells or whistles. Her smile widened, and there was a spark in her eyes that made the room feel smaller. "I was hoping you'd say that." She gestured to the central combat ring, her movements casual but precise. "Standard Federation rules. First to yield or go down loses. Want the first move, big guy? Go for it." The Kogath's laughter echoed through the chamber like a war drum as he stepped into the ring, his massive frame dwarfing Joe like a skyscraper over a sapling. "You're giving me the first move?" Against enhanced Kogath reflexes, he dropped into a fighting stance, scales gleaming menacingly. "This is your funeral, human." The students leaned forward, hearts pounding. Was she insane? The attack came like a meteor strike, a straight punch with enough force to shatter starship hulls. Several students gasped, hands flying to their mouths, expecting Joe to be reduced to dust. But can you believe it? She wasn't there. She'd shifted exactly 3 inches to the left, the punch grazing her uniform, ruffling it like a breeze. Before Thex could react, her staff tapped the back of his knee. Not a hit, just a feather-light tap. "That's one," she said, her voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, yet it carried like a thunderclap. Thex roared, spinning with impossible speed for his size, his razor-sharp tail whipping through the air at chest height. It could have sliced an unarmored foe in half. Joe dropped into a perfect split, the tail whooshing harmlessly overhead. Her staff flicked out, tapping his ankle with pinpoint precision. "Two," she called, calm as ever. The room was electric now, students frozen, eyes wide. What was she doing? The Kogath's attacks became a whirlwind of destruction. Punches, kicks, tail swipes, even his species' signature grappling moves, each one executed with textbook perfection, each one carrying enough power to reshape metal. The training room rang with the whoosh of displaced air and the shocked gasps of the onlookers. But Thex couldn't touch her. Joe moved like liquid, each motion flowing into the next, her body almost lazy in its grace, as if she had all the time in the galaxy. She didn't block, didn't counter, she just wasn't where the attacks landed. And after every dodge, her staff tapped another spot on Thex's body. 3. A light touch on his hip. 4. A tap on his shoulder blade. 5. A gentle prod at his lower back. The students watched, jaws dropped, as their mightiest classmate was dismantled by a human who hadn't thrown a single punch. Some started to notice a pattern in the taps. Were they strategic? Was she targeting something specific? Thex's frustration boiled over, his strikes growing faster, wilder, more desperate. Sweat beaded on his scales. Sweat? On a Kogath? Was that even possible? The room buzzed with disbelief. How was this tiny human outmatching him? Joe's voice cut through the chaos, steady and teasing. Getting tired, Thex? You've burned enough energy to power a starship, and I've barely moved. Want to know why you can't hit me? Her words were like a taunt, fueling his rage. Thex roared, his attacks a blur of raw power, but Joe flowed around them effortlessly, her staff tapping again and again, each touch a quiet promise of something bigger. The class held its breath, hearts racing. What was coming next? The air in the Galactic Training Academy's combat chamber was thick with shock, every student frozen as their mightiest classmate, Thex, was taken apart piece by piece by a human who hadn't even thrown a punch. Can you imagine the scene? The towering Kogath, his metallic scales glinting like a war machine, flailing against Lieutenant Joe, a 5 feet 3 inches human who moved like a shadow, untouchable and serene. Some students squinted, trying to crack the code of her precise taps, each one landing with purpose on Thex's body. Was there a pattern? What was she doing? Thex's frustration boiled over, his attacks growing faster, more ferocious, but wildly erratic, like a storm losing control. Sweat, actual sweat, beaded on his scales, a sight so alien that gasps rippled through the crowd. Sweat on a Kogath? Was that even possible? Getting tired, big guy? Joe asked, her voice steady, her breathing as calm as a still lake. You've burned enough energy to power a shuttle, and I've barely shifted an inch. Want to know why you can't land a hit on me? Her words were a tease, a spark in the tense air, and they only fueled Thex's rage. Stop talking, he roared, each word a thunderclap, punctuated by strikes that could have leveled skyscrapers. His fist rocketed forward, but Joe ducked with effortless grace. Another punch, she sidestepped like it was a dance. A third, and she seemed to flow around it, her movements liquid and precise. You're stronger than me, she said, her staff tapping his elbow with a soft tick. 6. A flick to his wrist. 7. Faster too, a tap on his spine, so light it was almost mocking. 8. Your reflexes are enhanced. A final tap on the back of his neck. 9. And then, one last, deliberate tap. 10. Suddenly, Thex's legs buckled like a house of cards. He stumbled, arms flailing uselessly, trying to catch himself, but his body betrayed him. The mighty Kogath warrior crashed to the training room floor, his massive frame twitching, helpless as a newborn. The room was silent, the air heavy with disbelief. What did you do to me? Thex slurred, his voice thick, his pride shattered as he lay sprawled before the class. Joe knelt beside him, her composure unshaken, her brown eyes calm but kind. Each tap hit a nerve cluster in Kogath physiology, she explained, her tone gentle yet firm, like a teacher unveiling a secret. Hit them in the right sequence, and your neuromuscular system shuts down for about 10 minutes. Don't worry, you'll be fine, no lasting damage. She stood, turning to the stunned class, her small frame commanding the room like a giant. I spent 3 months studying Kogath anatomy before I stepped foot in this academy. I didn't stop there, oh no. I studied VASI pressure points, Shinar resonance frequencies, Gar gravitational quirks, every species' weaknesses, down to the smallest detail. I pored over combat footage, medical records, ancient battle accounts. Why? Because humans don't have natural weapons. We can't generate your massive forces, secrete paralyzing toxins, or bend the laws of nature. But this, she tapped her temple, her eyes blazing with conviction. This is our strength. We study, we plan, we adapt, and we never assume being deadly makes you a warrior. The class was speechless, their earlier smirks and snickers replaced by wide-eyed awe as two students helped Thex to a recovery pod, his massive form still trembling. Joe waited, patient and composed, until he was settled comfortably before continuing, her voice softening but no less powerful. On Earth, we forged thousands of combat styles over centuries, not because we were born with claws or venom, but because we weren't. We had to outsmart creatures stronger, faster, better armed than us. Can you imagine the grit it took? She activated a holographic display, ancient human combat manuals flickering to life like ghosts from another time. These techniques, they're our legacy. Japanese warriors mastered using an opponent's strength against them. Chinese masters found ways to cripple enemies with a single strike to vital points. Russian soldiers turned everyday objects, sticks, stones, anything, into deadly weapons. Every culture faced unique threats and carved out unique solutions. That's who we are. Nyx, the Vasi, raised her head, her forked tongue flicking thoughtfully, her serpentine eyes narrowing. But those techniques, they only worked on humans, right? How could they possibly apply to us? Joe's smile was warm, almost proud, like a mentor seeing a spark of curiosity. Oh, Nyx, you'd think so, wouldn't you? But we hone these skills against everything. Massive predators, armored war machines, threats that would have crushed us if we tried to match their strength. When humans faced a new danger, we didn't try to outmuscle it. No way. We studied it, found its cracks, and built countermeasures. The hologram shifted, showing human martial arts in action, swift, precise, devastating. Look at this. See how this move redirects force, or how this strike targets joints. These principles don't care about your natural advantages. They work on any opponent. It's not about being the strongest or fastest. It's about turning your enemy's strengths into their downfall. That's the human way. Prism, his crystalline form shimmering with intrigue, leaned forward, light dancing through his transparent limbs. Is that why the Federation picked humans as combat instructors? Because you've spent your whole history outsmarting superior foes. Partially, Joe said with a laugh, the sound light, but full of meaning. But it's bigger than that. Prism. Humans don't just adapt techniques, we adapt ourselves. Every challenge we face, we evolve, we rethink, we rebuild. We've had to, because we were never the galaxy's top dogs. You all. She swept her hand toward the students, her eyes gleaming. Your species evolved as apex predators, with natural weapons that ruled your worlds. Claws, venom, energy manipulation. You were born deadly. But humans? We were prey animals who decided to climb to the top through sheer stubbornness and ingenuity. We don't have one perfect trick up our sleeve. We've got thousands of messy, brilliant solutions, and we keep tweaking them, combining them, making them better. That's our edge. The Helix representative shifted forward, their adaptive form rippling like a living wave, their voice humming with curiosity. That's why you were watching us so closely during the assessments, isn't it? You weren't just judging us, you were planning. Exactly. Joe's eyes sparkled with excitement, her small frame practically vibrating with passion. I wasn't just grading your moves. I was figuring out how to make your natural gifts even deadlier with human techniques. Imagine Vasi flexibility paired with joint locks, Kogath strength with precision strikes, Shinar energy redirection with tactical smarts. Your natural weapons, supercharged with strategy. How unstoppable would you be? Her words lit a fire in the room, the students leaning forward, their minds racing. Could they really become that powerful? The atmosphere transformed, the earlier dismissive sneers replaced by a buzzing, electric curiosity. Students started whispering, brainstorming how their abilities could mesh with human combat styles, their voices alive with possibility. Over the next few weeks, the combat training chamber became a crucible of martial innovation, a place where pride gave way to passion. Where once stood warriors obsessed with their natural gifts, now stood students hungry to expand their skills. Thex, fully recovered from his humbling defeat, both physically and emotionally, threw himself into training with a zeal that stunned everyone. His massive strikes, once brute and wild, now landed with surgical precision, each one a testament to human technique. It's like swapping a sledgehammer for a laser, he marveled to his classmates, practicing controlled blows on reinforced targets, his scales gleaming with newfound purpose. The Vasi students, led by Nyx, discovered a whole new dimension of combat. Their natural flexibility, paired with human grappling techniques, turned them into living traps, coiling and striking with deadly precision. Nyx, in particular, was a revelation, blending her species' hypnotic movements with misdirection tactics that made her a phantom on the battlefield, impossible to track. "It's like I'm dancing through their defenses," she hissed, her eyes gleaming with pride as she outmaneuvered her sparring partners. But the Shinar delegation? Oh, they were the showstoppers. Their natural ability to absorb and redirect energy, when fused with human defensive principles, became a weapon of devastating elegance. Prism led his crystalline companions in crafting a new combat style, one that blended their shimmering resilience with human martial arts philosophy. Even the lightest attack could be turned into a counterstrike that left opponents reeling. "It's not just defense, it's art," Prism declared, his voice resonating like a chime as he redirected a practice blast with a flourish. Lieutenant Joe moved through the training room like a conductor, tweaking stances, suggesting refinements, her small frame a beacon of wisdom. She'd demonstrate a new combination, her movements so fluid they seemed to defy gravity, and the students watched, riveted, knowing every gesture carried centuries of human combat evolution. Her size? No longer a joke, it was a badge of her ingenuity. "Combat isn't about being the perfect weapon," she told them during a grueling session, her voice ringing with conviction. "It's about being the right weapon at the right moment." Humans learned that through blood and necessity. You're learning it by choice, and that makes you unstoppable. Don't you feel it? On graduation day, the combat chamber was packed with Federation officials and veteran instructors from across the galaxy, all buzzing with curiosity about this controversial human-led program. The demonstration that followed left them speechless, jaws on the floor. Thex and Nyx took the stage, their synchronized routine a breathtaking blend of raw power and fluid grace that seemed to defy physics itself. His thunderous strikes met her serpentine agility in a dance of destruction and elegance. The Shinar delegation followed, their new defensive techniques a dazzling spectacle of redirected energy, each move so precise it had even the grizzled instructors scrambling for their data pads to take notes. Every student showcased how they'd transformed their natural abilities into something extraordinary, all thanks to human combat principles. Can you picture the pride in that room? Lieutenant Joe stood at attention, watching her students with a quiet, unshakable pride that seemed to radiate from her core. When the final demonstration ended, she stepped forward, her small frame commanding the massive chamber. When these students first arrived, they saw a tiny human trying to teach combat to natural-born warriors, she said, her voice clear and strong. Today, they've learned a truth humans carved out long ago. True strength isn't in your natural gifts. It's in your ability to adapt, to learn, to grow beyond your limits. That's what makes a warrior. She turned to her graduating class, standing tall despite being dwarfed by her towering alien students, her eyes shining with fierce conviction. Remember this lesson, always. The galaxy is vast, and there'll always be someone stronger, faster, more gifted. But victory? That belongs to those who never stop learning, never stop adapting, and never, ever underestimate anyone, not even a small human with a simple staff. Her words echoed, a rallying cry that left the room buzzing with awe and inspiration. Who could doubt her now?